November Power Talk. It is time for you to hear from a wonderfully high-profile, wonderfully eloquent person in our leadership community in the Twin Cities. She is the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer of Piper Jaffray, Deb Schoneman. Welcome to the show, Deb.
Thank you. Great to be here.
You know, it is great to have you here. You're sort of an unusual story in today's business climate in that you started about 26 years ago at Piper as an intern.
That's correct.
Could you have imagined that in 2008 you'd be named CFO?
Absolutely not. I would say when I started, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I will tell you, probably 10 years into it, though, my husband kept saying, you're going to be the next CFO. And I would somewhat reject that comment, but 2008, there I was.
He had ESP, apparently.
Apparently.
So what is it like, because you're one of the few women CFOs, really. Luckily, the rank is growing, the numbers of women in these C-suite positions, but it's still kind of slim. What is it like being the CFO, first of all?
Yeah, I think being the CFO, first of all, there's many aspects to it. And historically, I think when I first moved into it, thought of it more as a technical role, really more around the finances of the organization. And then as I grew, realizing it could really be a much more strategic role, getting involved with the strategy of the firm, and even more importantly, really getting involved with employee engagement. And I think, I've never really considered it so much being a woman in the role versus just being myself in the role, and have never felt that there was anything external to me either that really made it, me feel different in that role. One thing I would say is, I did have to get used to, for many years, dealing with being in leadership teams with all men, right? And that was just something I became used to.
It's a good observation of yourself too, right? So you're in this position. You came into the role in May of 2008 when we were going through what turned out to be a pretty major financial crisis in this country. Piper, which is a very well-known Minnesota brand, but national company, it was not doing great. You were part of leading this turnaround. What was that like? And talk about kind of those real life jobs that were at stake that you had to oversee.
Yeah, I would say, as I look back, it was actually a rewarding time, even though we did have to make a lot of difficult decisions that ultimately did impact people's lives relative to their jobs. But I think what was rewarding about it was really being connected with the other leaders. We were all in it together. And for many, many weeks, there would be a daily meeting in the morning where we would really have to strategize. What were we doing with our balance sheet? What were we doing with costs across the firm? And being in that collaborative mode in such a tight way with the rest of the leaders actually made it quite rewarding.
And then what was it like for kind of as we go down through the company, the frontline workers? Because, I'm sure many of them were worried about losing their jobs.
Absolutely. It was a scary time for many. I would say Piper Jaffray came out better than some firms, just in the types of businesses we were in. We avoided some of the really tough challenges. But that said, it was challenging. People were nervous. Morale was down. And what we found is trying to be as transparent and open with everyone as you could be. Sometimes you can't be fully transparent, but trying to be open and listening to be able to respond with the right messages to help them get over those fears.
I'm talking with Deb Schoneman. She's the Chief Financial Officer of Piper Jaffray. If you have any questions for her, feel free to text us, 81807, or you can call 651-989-9226 or 866-989-9226. The topic of women in finance is one that has really been getting a lot of attention lately because this is such an area of making a good living, and not a lot of women are in it. There are a lot of men in it. They'll continue to be in it. It's a great living for men and women. So if you have any questions about this, your own job prospects, or you a student out there wondering if you could go into this zone, here's someone who loves to be a mentor and is happy to answer your questions. Speaking of mentoring, Deb, did you have any mentors during your career? And do you still?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say that someone's going to be assigned to you as a mentor, right? And I sometimes struggle with those types of relationships. I think I had many mentors along the way, and almost I would call some of them even more sponsors of me. really helping me understand what I could do better, maybe guiding me to people that I could go to. And in many cases, it was just my immediate boss along the way. And I found, at least throughout my experience at Piper Jaffray, had a lot of wonderful people that I reported to who were very helpful. But I do think it's important that you have someone with different experiences to help you think about what you should be doing next.
And so sometimes they're also challenging you.
Absolutely.
What are some of the things that you rely on for your own success? So you started as an intern at that company, probably didn't think you'd one day become the chief financial officer, but here you are, and now you're in a position to sponsor others, mentor others. What are some of those foundations of success you count on?
Yes. I'd say there's a few of them as I've looked back at my career over the years. One of them that I always talk about is just attitude. Which seems pretty basic, but at the end of the day, attitude is a matter of choice. It's being willing to get rid of any victim mentality and just move forward. I think people want to be around people who have a positive attitude. It's contagious. It's energizing. So that's just a fundamental way to, I think, show up every day. Another thing that I have found as I look back, and I didn't fully realize the difference between being responsible and being accountable until I would say maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And I can be made responsible as an employee for something that I'm supposed to do. But it's really about being accountable. And accountable it's a state of mind. It is the personal ownership that you put into the job that you're doing. And I think that extra move from just being responsible to being accountable is something that really helped me out a lot.
What about those people out there who want to take on more responsibility in their jobs, no matter what field they're in? What's your advice to them?
It would start with being confident that you can do it. I think sometimes that holds people back. They are not sure that they can really take on that next step. And, oftentimes we talk about moving out of our comfort zone. And I had heard some terminology a few years ago that I really loved as I struggled myself with, in many cases, just pushing myself outside of my comfort zone. And it was described to me as moving into your learning zone. And that was just a light bulb for me to say, okay, those times when I'm fearful or don't think I can do it, if I think of it rather than being negative out of my comfort zone, but positive into that learning zone, it's really, I found that it really encouraged me, almost myself, to move forward. And once you do that a few times, you realize how rewarding that can be. So first of all, it's having the confidence to do it. And secondly, I guess the advice for people who want to, move into bigger roles is to really be willing to step outside of what you might be responsible for. And getting back to that accountability, be accountable for something you're not even responsible for. Look out, and if there's a problem that needs to be solved, can you solve that problem and step into that?
There are a lot of people who maybe don't aspire to become the chief executive or chief financial officer of their company, but they do want to maximize their potential in their current roles. And, it's coming on end of year. People are having these end of year discussions, maybe with their bosses for raises or promotions or extra vacation. Can you give some little insider tips on what you're in a position to say yes to those things with your teams? What are some tips you give to our listeners who may be asking for some of those things moving forward into 2016, and some insight as to how they can power up those conversations?
Yeah, as I, listen to requests over time, a big part of it is making sure that those requests are really grounded. And so a lot of us we all have assessments that we carry either about ourselves, about others, about maybe the role that we have, the compensation that we have, et cetera. And for me, it's really making sure that you ground those assessments. And it has always come down to, for me, what is fair as you look out in the marketplace, but also as you look internally at an organization. And so I think being sure that you're not showing up with just a lot of emotional assessments that aren't necessarily grounded in some way.
And you have realistic expectations. You also can really be clear about what you've accomplished for the company, for your team.
Absolutely. And I think it's good to step back, and I've done this many times, even at the end of a year, to say, what did I all accomplish this year, and making sure that I'm putting my full self forward. And it's a good idea just throughout the year to keep track of those things that you've done and almost have that tally that you're putting forth throughout the year.
At one point, you said your dream job would be a tour guide in Australia or on an African safari. What is it about those that draw you?
You know, both of those, they're on my bucket list of things to do. So it's probably part of why I had said that before. And I think it's the adventure of it. As I think about myself, I tend to not be a very adventurous person. It's something I've pushed myself into being more over the years. And so I think that at the end of the day, it's that excitement of being in a more adventurous situation.
Speaking of adventure, is there a pitfall that if you could wave your magic wand, you could help people prevent in their own lives or their own careers, based on what you've seen 26 years at Piper in your own life?
Yeah, you know, I think as I think of my own pitfalls and where I had struggled over time, a lot of it gets back again to these assessments and making sure that that little voice that's in your head that's telling you things, positive or negative, that you're willing to challenge that voice and make sure that in fact you feel is true of yourself. And just an example, as I moved into my role, I had an assessment around what a female CFO should look like, and where that assessment came from, whether it was Hollywood or otherwise, I don't know. But this image in my mind was someone who was, you know, pretty aggressive, uber confident, no nonsense, you know, maybe really hitting the facts home on a daily basis. And so without me really realizing, I tried to be that type of person and really struggled with confidence, with my energy level, with my passion for the role. And through some really good work around being self-aware, determined over time that I had that assessment and was holding that and was able to push that aside and then really be authentic.
And
so
just be
that
you.
would be my message is individuals be so much more powerful and so much more successful if they just allow themselves to be themselves and be authentic.
All right. So we'll wind down on one real fun question. If there's any place that you could visit in the world, where would you go and why? Separate from Australia and the African safaris.
Oh, boy. You know, one place that I always think about is the Galapagos Islands. And there's just something about it that I picture as being so incredibly beautiful, just nature at its core, that has always been something that is another one of those sort of bucket list places for me.
Well, thank you so much. Deb Schoneman is the Chief Financial Officer of Piper Jaffray. She's our Power Talk for November. Wonderful having you in studio today, Deb.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. And we're going to